Hey guys, welcome back to another Was It Work video. So today's topic is going to be the latest Doctor Who special of the 60th anniversary titled The Star Beast. If you saw my recent review of this episode, you know I have a lot to say regarding the wokeness of this episode, so strap yourselves in, this one's going to be a big one. Starting off with racial diversity. So there is a lot of diversity in this show. Now you could construe that in two ways. One, this is a Disney property and this is Doctor Who, which has been very much going down the diverse path for years now. And so it's no surprise that you're going to see a lot of diverse individuals on the screen. No problem with that in isolation. And, you know, if I'm going to give credit to, this is obviously set in London. London is a very diverse city, so you're going to see a lot of that. But that said, I have to, always acknowledge the fact that this is now Disney. And whenever it's Disney, we know what their dogma is. We know what they're trying to do to always force it into everything. And this was no exception too. You can see it at every turn in this episode, the forced diversity hires essentially. And so for this criteria, I'm going to give a 6 out of 10 for racial diversity. Number 2 is LGBTQ representation. So there is a lot going on in this episode, namely with this character Rose, who is the daughter of Donna. She is a trans character, and it is continuously brought up throughout the episode, for first being bullied, being called her old name, secondly being used later on when talking about genders and whatnot, when the Doctor assumes the Meep's gender, and she tries to correct him. So there's that going on, and then at the very end of the episode, at the very absolute climax, her being trans, non-binary, helps essentially save the day in her being born from Donna, and forming two who are able to essentially to save the day, because Donna no longer has to die as a result of her sacrifice. And so I could explain all that. It's going to take me too long to make that make sense, but that's basically what happens at the very end. They use her, and she literally repeats the word non-binary in reference to herself being trans. And so it's like it is ingrained within this episode, her being trans, and they make it known. Yes, the actor is trans in real life too, so it's both character and actor here. I don't have any problem with people doing their personal lives, but they are clearly forcing this here in the show and making it a part of it, and even bending the lore of Doctor Who to incorporate it in, literally changing Donna's story from what had happened previously with her years before and changing the outcome with that now, so that she doesn't die once she knows who the Doctor is, and they use the help of a trans person to do that. And so it's so blatant to me, and so for that I'm going to give a 10 out of 10 for LGBTQ representation. Number 3 is toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. So starting off with the males, the Doctor, David Tennant's Doctor in this episode, is beat down so many times by the women in this episode. It's a joke. They make him look inferior. They constantly remind him that he is a man, and so he does not understand certain things. So they are constantly just beating him down for their feminist agenda. And at the same time, you've got Sean, who is the dad, the husband of Donna and the dad of the trans girl. He is beat down all the time too. He happily admits, oh, well, she didn't need to take my last name. Meanwhile, my child took my wife's last name, and I'm fine with that. They're just making this ultimate beta, and it's a joke. And at every turn, he's undermined too and made to look like not a man, I should say. And so the men in this episode are meant to look really weak and pathetic at every turn. Meanwhile, the women are made to look powerful, like they're in command, in control, they know everything, they know better than the Doctor, and no one should know better than the Doctor, but here they keep proving, oh, we know better than you. And frankly, and this was the icing on the cake, by saying to the Doctor that because you are a man, you will understand this, but when you were a woman, you would have. And we could talk about that all day long, how stupid that is, but the Doctor was a woman, yes. And he remembers that, so he would know what that woman knew that was supposedly different to being a man. But again, this is all rubbish. They just injected it into this episode. And so, yeah, this one, just like LGBTQ representation, I'm giving a 10 out of 10 for toxic masculinity / feminist messaging. Number 4 is traditions bad, progressivism good. This episode is all about progressivism. There is no sense of tradition here. In fact, they even undermine some of the law and traditions of the Doctor that we have known about him for decades now. They undermine some of those things and even change some of them. But on top of that, especially the whole progressive agenda here at play with feminism, transgenderism, all of these things, and gender neutrality, all these new, they're so blatant and shoved down your throat at every turn. And so this one, it's not quite as bad, I would say, as the toxic masculinity element or the LGBTQ side of things, but it's still pretty bad. And so I'm going to give a 9 out of 10 for traditions bad, progressivism good. Fifth and last is anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. So there's no real reference to either of those in this episode, but what I will say is, and it's a very loose tie here, but I needed to bring this up because the other categories didn't really meet the criteria of the other ones, so I want to bring it up here. But there is a disabled character in this episode who leads the unit team, who's a military force and whatnot, and she is in a wheelchair. Now her wheelchair is decked out with rockets, lasers and whatnot, and she uses them to fight bad guys and all this stuff, and she's constantly on the front lines fighting the bad guys. And it's like, it's so stupid and blatant and it's disrespectful to disabled people, if you ask me, because it's like, it's patronizing of them and their disability to suggest, if you're trying to represent them and say that they are capable of these amazing things, that this is not the way to win them over. Like, treating them as equals, as people of equal value. This is how we should treat anyone and everyone, regardless of their abilities or disabilities in life. And just, it's quite patronizing. And doesn't mean I'm against creativity of, obviously Professor X from X-Men, he's in a wheelchair and he's very powerful, but they still obviously treat his disability the way it needs to be treated. He needs the help at times for the physical aspect, and whilst his mind powers, are greater than anyone else's. But here it's like they've got her on the front lines firing rockets. Meanwhile, there's no recoil on her chair. Like, her chair should go flying every time she fires a rocket, but it doesn't. And at the same time, so they're trying to suggest that her wheelchair is so high tech and decked out with all these artillery and whatever. Meanwhile, she has to roll the chair herself, so it's not that high tech. And it's like, and they kept that because they want you to see that, oh, she is a disabled person. This is the plight of a disabled person to have to wield their chair. But meanwhile, they get to fire rockets. Like, what are we doing here? This is a joke. This is a joke through and through. And I'm sorry, like, to me, obviously I'm not a disabled person, but like, if I were, that would be patronizing to me seeing something like that. And they are trying to pander. We know what they did in that short that they released before this episode, talking about the villain Davros, who's no longer going to be in a wheelchair because too many times in the past they believed that films had tried to associate disabled people as associate them with being evil. And it's like, what are you talking about? It's ridiculous. There's so many examples, and I just mentioned Professor X as one of them. So many great examples in fiction of good disabled people, and it's like, it's just blowing my mind. But yeah, that rounds it out. But look, that is, in terms of anti-capitalism, pro-socialism, it doesn't really feed into that. But when I was thinking of socialism, it kind of fed into the thinking that I think goes into making a decision like this to make a high-tech disabled person leading on the front line. So for that, I'm going to give a 3 out of 10 for anti-capitalism / pro-socialism. And so the totals of these 5 criteria equal 38. You take that 38 and divide it by the 5 criteria, and that equals 7.6, which, congratulations, we have our first very woke property or media on this channel ever. And I've done a bunch of Wasn't Woke videos till now, and this is the first one to ever reach the very woke status. And frankly, I'm not that surprised that it's Doctor Who that achieved this honor on my channel, because Doctor Who, kind of like Star Trek, always had sort of its roots in some sort of progressive ideologies, but they were never to the level of like what today's standards are. But they always had these ideas of diversity and things like that, but they did them naturally. But I'm not surprised that when a property like this gets hijacked, that it's a much quicker decline down this path than the likes of like a Star Wars or Lord of the Rings, or whatever you want to, whichever example you want to give. Anyways, guys, so the first of 3 Doctor Who 60th anniversary specials turned out very woke. Who knows what that means for the next 2 coming forward or for the coming seasons. We'll hold our breaths and see what happens. I'll judge them each as they come and review them each as they come. But yeah, that's all my thoughts on this one for today, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. What did you think of the wokeness of this episode? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel, and we'll see you next time.